The summer of 1944 was supposed to be the season Germany turned the tide back in its favor. At least, that's what the German High Command had convinced itself. Normandy had been a disaster, yes, but the German generals still believed they could salvage something. They still believed that the Allies were cautious, slow, predictable, and unwilling to take risks. They believed they could stabilize the front before it fully collapsed. They still thought they had time. Then came Patton. The Falaise pocket was meant to be a German escape route, a corridor through which tens of thousands of German soldiers, panzer units, infantry divisions, SS regiments, could slip out of France, regroup, and fight again on their own terms. It was their last hope to avoid catastrophe, and the German High Command clung to that hope desperately. But hope can be a fragile thing on a battlefield where George S. Patton is advancing. When Patton's Third Army broke loose into France like a storm that could not be stopped, German generals in their dim command bunkers started to feel something they hadn't felt in years: fear. Not the fear of defeat, they were used to setbacks, but the fear of an enemy they could not predict, an enemy who moved faster than their reports, faster than their orders, faster even than their imaginations. For the German commanders trapped in the shrinking corridor near Falaise, the reports about Patton seemed impossible. Patrols would return with breathless accounts of American armor appearing in places they shouldn't be, villages supposedly far behind German lines, crossroads thought to be safe, fields where no one expected the Allies for at least another day or two. Yet their Patton's tanks were pushing eastward, slicing into the rear of the German retreat. One German colonel wrote in frustration, "It is as if the Americans no longer advance by roads. They appear out of the earth." But the real moment that broke German confidence came when Patton executed a maneuver so rapid, so aggressive, that senior German officers actually accused each other of having bad intelligence. They refused to believe the Americans could move that fast. They believed someone must have made a mistake. No mistake had been made. It was simply Patton doing what Patton did best. In early August, when the Allied High Command realized they had a chance to encircle a huge German force, they moved aggressively to close the pocket from both the north and the south. Montgomery's forces pushed down from the north. Bradley and Patton surged upward from the south. And in the middle, tens of thousands of German soldiers were desperately trying to escape. Every hour mattered. Every minute counted. Every mile that Patton advanced squeezed the pocket tighter, and German High Command watched in disbelief as their forces became trapped like an animal caught between closing jaws. Inside the German command headquarters, the mood turned from anxious to frantic. Maps of Normandy were spread across long wooden tables. Cigarette smoke hung in the air. Officers argued over distances, reports, and timings. One message, intercepted and later translated by Allied intelligence, captured the atmosphere perfectly. A German operations officer wrote, "The American general with the stars on his helmet moves his army as if he is driving a single machine. They do not rest. They do not stop. They are upon us before we prepare the defense." The American general with the stars on his helmet was Patton, of course, and he was driving his Third Army with relentless energy, pushing them to advance harder and faster, because he understood something the Germans didn't. The entire fate of France could be decided in these few days. If the Germans escaped, the war in France would drag on for months. If they were trapped, the German army in the West would be crippled beyond repair. Patton knew the importance of the moment, and he fought like it. As Patton's divisions closed in toward the narrow gap at Falaise, German units reported that American tanks were appearing behind them. Some German commanders were absolutely convinced the Americans must have used special roads or some new tactic they had never seen. Others believed, wrongly, that Patton had thrown caution to the wind and overextended himself. The truth was simpler. Patton had simply outthought and outmoved them. At one point, a panicked German major phoned his superior and said, "The Americans are everywhere. We do not understand how they move so quickly." His superior snapped back, then stop reporting movement and start stopping it. But the younger officer, exhausted and overwhelmed, replied with something that would later be included in Allied intelligence files. "We cannot stop something we cannot locate. They move like water." That was the feeling across the German ranks. The Americans were spreading, flowing, seeping into every gap, every weakness, every open field, every crossroads. There was no clear front line anymore, no distinct map, no understanding of where Patton would strike. Meanwhile, Patton kept pushing. He drove his men hard, but he inspired them even harder. He made every soldier feel like part of a mission that would shape history. And as Third Army reached the southern edge of the shrinking corridor, Patton sensed that the German High Command was beginning to realize the truth. They were running out of space, running out of options, running out of time. Reports from German generals grew increasingly desperate. One senior officer sent a message to Berlin that read, "Our positions collapse faster than they can be reported. The American thrust led by General Patton is not a normal advance. It is a penetration without pause." That phrase, penetration without pause, was the German High Command's attempt to describe something they had never seen before. They were used to American caution, to methodical advances, to the slow grinding movement of armies dependent on long supply lines. But in Patton, they faced a commander who saw speed as his primary weapon, momentum as his advantage, and shock as his ally. The German generals in the Falaise pocket expected the Americans to slow down. They expected Patton to halt, reorganize, and wait for infantry to catch up. But every time they predicted he would stop, he accelerated. When they thought he would turn left, he turned right. When they thought they were clear, American artillery blasted into their positions. When they thought they had an open road, American tanks rolled across it. And slowly, the psychological impact began to crush them. One German brigade commander later wrote in his diary, "Patton fights with an appetite. You feel consumed, not defeated." His words reflected something deeper than battlefield losses. It was the realization that Patton fought with a kind of ferocity and confidence that Germany had not expected from the Americans. As the pocket tightened, some German generals begged for permission to retreat faster, to abandon equipment, to abandon positions, even to abandon their wounded. Others demanded reinforcements that Berlin could not send. And inside this whirlwind of collapse, a single sentence began circulating through the German officer corps, a sentence that summed up their disbelief. Where does Patton find the strength to push so far? It was partly a question about logistics. How did he keep fuel flowing? How did he keep armor repaired? How did he keep soldiers moving without rest? But it was also a question about spirit. Because Patton's army advanced not just with machines, but with morale, with a belief that the war could be broken open in a single decisive stroke. And that belief, more than anything, terrified the German High Command. As the pocket neared closure, the German commander in charge of the retreat sent a final message to Berlin. His words were grim, honest, and deeply revealing. "We have underestimated Patton. His movement through our rear is the most rapid operation of this war. The pocket is lost." That was the moment, the exact moment, when the German High Command finally accepted what had been obvious for days. Patton had beaten them not only on the ground, but in the mind. His speed had shattered their plans. His aggression had broken their lines. His unpredictability had turned their confidence into chaos. And as the last corridors closed and the Falaise pocket finally snapped shut, thousands of German soldiers surrendered. Thousands more lay dead or wounded. Tanks, trucks, guns, supplies, entire battalions were reduced to twisted metal in the narrow roads choked with wreckage. The German High Command's last hope of salvaging the Western Front had vanished. All because Patton moved faster than the war itself. In the aftermath, as Allied commanders surveyed the devastation, the intercepted German messages were studied carefully. And among them was one final statement, one that American intelligence officers highlighted because it captured the German reaction better than anything else. A German general had written, "Patton is not a soldier in the old sense. He is a force, and we could not withstand him." A force. To the German High Command, that was the only way to describe the man who had broken through at Falaise, collapsing their plans, crushing their escape, and sealing the fate of an entire German army. Patton didn't just command troops. He changed the pace of the war. He altered the momentum of an entire continent. He made the German commanders fear not just defeat, but the speed at which it arrived. And long after the pocket was closed, long after France was liberated, and long after the German command files were studied, one truth remained clear. The day Patton broke through at Falaise was the day the German High Command finally realized that the war in the West was lost. Not because they lacked courage, not because they lacked weapons, but because they faced a commander who refused to fight the way they expected, a commander who used speed as a blade, a commander who transformed his army into something faster, sharper, and more relentless than anything Germany had prepared for. That was Patton's impact. That was the moment the German High Command understood they were facing something unstoppable. And that is the story of what the German High Command said when Patton broke through the Falaise pocket and crushed their final hope of escaping France. Thanks for watching.